Sam found the door on a Thursday. He was 10 years old, and he was looking for his dog. The dog, a mutt named Biscuit, who had more energy than sense, had bolted into the woods behind his grandparents' farm and disappeared into the underbrush like a furry torpedo. Sam followed, calling his name, pushing through ferns and low branches, getting further from the house than he was technically allowed to go. The woods behind the farm were old, not the kind of old that means a few decades, the kind of old that means the trees have been there longer than anyone alive. His grandfather, who was 78 and had lived on the farm his entire life, called them the deep woods and said to stay out. His grandmother, who was 75 and had stronger opinions about everything, said the same thing but louder. Sam usually listened. He was a good kid. Quiet. The kind of quiet that worried his parents sometimes, the kind that comes from being an only child in a house where adults talk about bills and schedules and forget to ask what you are thinking. He spent his summers at the farm because his parents worked and his grandparents had room. He liked the farm. He liked the quiet. He liked the space between things. But Biscuit did not like boundaries. And Sam liked Biscuit more than he liked rules. He found the dog first. Biscuit was standing in a clearing about a quarter-mile into the woods, tail up, nose pointed at the ground, making the whining sound he made when he found something interesting. Usually interesting meant a dead squirrel or a muddy tennis ball. But when Sam reached the clearing and looked at what Biscuit was pointing at, he stopped walking. There was a door in the ground. A flat metal door, roughly 4 feet square, lying flush with the forest floor. Leaves and moss covered most of it, but Biscuit had scratched away enough to expose a rusted metal surface with a handle recessed into the center. The door looked like it had been there for a long time. The metal was oxidized, the same brown-orange as the surrounding earth. The handle was crusted with corrosion. If Biscuit had not scratched the leaves away, you could walk over it 1,000 times and never know. Sam knelt beside it. He was 10. His brain processed the discovery the way a 10-year-old brain processes everything, with a mixture of wonder, fear, and an immediate certainty that this was the most important thing that had ever happened to him. He pulled leaves away from the edges. The door was set into a concrete frame that extended into the ground. The frame was old, cracked in places, with tree roots growing around and over it. He pulled the handle. The door did not move. He pulled harder. A creak, a grind, and the door lifted an inch. Air pushed through the gap, cool and musty, smelling like earth and stone and time. Sam pulled again. The door rose on hinges he could not see, revealing a concrete shaft with metal rungs set into the wall. A ladder leading down into darkness. Sam had read enough books and watched enough movies to know that going down a ladder into an underground space alone, in the woods, without telling anyone, was a bad idea. He also knew that not going down would be something he would regret for the rest of his life. He was 10. Regret won. He climbed down. The rungs were solid. The shaft was about 8 feet deep. At the bottom, his sneakers landed on a concrete floor. He pulled out his phone, which his parents had given him for emergencies, and which he primarily used to watch videos of dogs doing tricks, and turned on the flashlight. The space was larger than the shaft suggested. A corridor extended forward, maybe 20 feet, with a low ceiling and smooth concrete walls. At the end of the corridor was another door. This one was open. Sam walked through it and into a room that should not have existed. The room was circular, about 30 feet across, with a domed ceiling that rose to a point 12 feet above. The walls were lined with shelves, floor to ceiling, and the shelves were filled with objects. Not just any objects. Organized, labeled, categorized objects. Jars of seeds, each one tagged with a species name and a date, boxes of soil samples, pressed flowers mounted on cards, insect specimens in glass cases, bird feathers arranged by size, stones sorted by type, and on a central table, under a glass dome, a small tree growing in a ceramic pot, alive, green, in a room underground with no sunlight. Sam stared at the tree. It was about a foot tall, with delicate leaves and thin branches. It should not have been alive. There was no light source except a faint blue glow from a panel on the ceiling that Sam recognized from a science lesson he had actually paid attention to as a grow light. A solar panel on the surface, invisible under the forest floor, was powering it. Someone had built a system to keep a tree alive underground, in the woods, behind his grandparents' farm. Biscuit barked from above. Sam ignored him. He was reading the labels on the shelves. Each specimen was documented in neat handwriting on small white cards. The handwriting was familiar. He had seen it on the labels in his grandmother's kitchen, the ones she taped to jars of preserves and freezer bags of vegetables. The same precise, angular script. This was his grandmother's room. Sam climbed back up the ladder and ran home. He burst through the kitchen door and found his grandmother, Nora, peeling potatoes at the sink. He was breathing hard. He said, "Grandma, I found it." Nora set down the peeler. She looked at him. She did not ask what he found. She did not ask where he had been. She sat down at the kitchen table and said, "Well, it took you long enough." Nora had been a botanist, not the kind that works at a university or publishes in journals, although she had done both for 20 years before retiring. The kind that cannot stop, the kind that sees a plant and needs to understand it, the kind that, upon retiring to a farm in the country, built an underground seed vault in the woods because the work was too important to stop just because she no longer had a lab. She told Sam the story over hot chocolate. In the 1970s, when she was a young researcher, she had been part of a project studying plant biodiversity in the region. The forests around the farm contained species that existed nowhere else, plants adapted to the specific soil and altitude and climate of that particular ridge in that particular valley. They were rare, fragile, and unprotected. In the 1980s, a mining company purchased mineral rights to the land surrounding the farm. They began exploratory drilling. The forest was not designated as protected habitat. No environmental assessment was required. Nora watched as bulldozers cleared sections of forest that contained species she had documented in her research, species that had not been catalogued by anyone else. She protested. She wrote letters. She contacted the State Environmental Agency. She testified at a public hearing. The mining company's lawyers were better funded and better connected. The drilling continued. The forest shrank. So Nora did something she never told anyone about. She went into the woods every morning and collected seeds, soil, specimens. She gathered samples of every species she could find, particularly the ones she knew were threatened. She built the underground room with help from her husband, Sam's grandfather, who was a retired engineer and understood how to pour concrete and install ventilation. They worked for 2 years. They told no one. The seed vault, which is what it was, contained samples from over 300 species of plants native to the surrounding forest. The seeds were stored in conditions designed for long-term preservation, cool, dry, dark. The soil samples documented the microbial environment each species needed to germinate. The specimens, the pressed flowers, the insect collections, the feathers and stones were the ecological context, not just the plant, but the world the plant lived in. The tree under the glass dome was the vault's crown jewel. Nora called it the Guardian. It was a specimen of a species that had been extirpated from the wild when the mining company cleared its last known habitat in 1997. As far as Nora knew, the tree under the dome was the last living example of its kind. She had been keeping it alive underground for 28 years. Sam listened to this with the seriousness of a child who understands, instinctively, that he is being told something important. He asked why she never told anyone. Nora said, because the mining company would have claimed it. They owned the mineral rights. Any biological material found on or under the land could be argued as their property. I was not going to let them own the last of something they had already destroyed. Sam asked if the mining company was still active. Nora said it had closed operations in 2004 and the mineral rights had reverted to the state. Sam asked if that meant the vault was safe now. Nora looked at him with an expression that was part pride and part sadness. She said, "The vault has always been safe. The forest has not." She took Sam to the university the following week. She contacted Dr. Wen, a former colleague in the botany department, and told her about the vault. Dr. Wen drove to the farm that same day. She descended the ladder, walked into the room, looked at the shelves and the specimens and the tree under the dome, and sat down on the concrete floor and put her head in her hands. She said, "Nora, this is a conservation miracle. 300 species. Some of these have not been seen in the wild in 20 years. You have been keeping them alive in a room in the woods for 3 decades. Nora said, "Someone had to. The university sent a team. They documented every specimen, every seed, every soil sample. The tree under the dome was confirmed as the sole surviving example of its species. The university propagated cuttings. Within a year, the species existed in 3 botanical gardens. Within 2 years, saplings were planted in protected sections of the forest. The species was no longer extinct. It was recovering. The mining company's successor, a holding firm that had acquired the dormant mineral rights, learned about the vault from the university's publication. Their lawyers sent a letter claiming ownership of the biological materials found on their leasehold property. The letter cited mineral rights statutes that broadly defined subsurface assets. Dr. Wen and the university's legal team responded. They argued that biological specimens are not mineral assets. They argued that the vault had been constructed before the mining company acquired its lease. They argued that the seeds and specimens had been collected from the surface, not the subsurface, and were the product of Nora's intellectual labor, not the company's property rights. The case was settled without trial. The holding firm, which had no interest in seeds and was primarily concerned with future liability, surrendered any claim to the biological materials in exchange for the university, assuming maintenance responsibility for the vault. Sam was 11 when the case settled. He watched the proceedings with the focused attention of a child who had found a door in the woods and understood, more clearly than any adult in the room, what was at stake. The tree under the dome, the seeds on the shelves, the last of things that should not have been the last. He asked Nora what would happen to the vault now. She said the university would take over. They would maintain the grow light. They would monitor the specimens. They would continue the propagation program. The vault would become a research site, formally recognized, properly funded, no longer dependent on an old woman with a flashlight and a watering can. Sam said, "But you built it." Nora smiled. She said, "I built it so someone would find it." She looked at him. "I just did not know it would be you." Sam is 13 now. He visits the vault every time he stays at the farm. He has a key given to him by Nora, who still makes the trip underground once a week, despite her knees. He helps Dr. Wen's students with the monitoring. He has learned the names of every species on the shelves. He can identify 37 plants by their seeds alone. The tree under the dome is still there. It has grown. New branches, new leaves, pushing toward the blue light on the ceiling. It does not know it is the last of its kind. It does not know that a boy and a dog found the door that kept it alive. It just grows, the way trees do, steady and patient and indifferent to the drama of the world above it. Biscuit still runs into the woods. Sam still follows. But now, when they reach the clearing, Biscuit does not scratch at the door. He lies down beside it and waits, tail thumping gently, while Sam climbs down the ladder into the room that should not exist and checks on the tree that should not be alive, and reads the labels in his grandmother's handwriting, and feels, every time, the same thing he felt at 10 years old when he first pulled the handle and the door opened. Wonder. The specific, irreplaceable wonder of a child who discovers that the world is more complicated and more beautiful and more worth protecting than anyone has told him. His grandmother told him. Not with words. With a room. With 300 species on shelves. With a tree under a dome. With a door in the woods behind the farm, hidden under leaves, waiting for a boy and a dog to find it on a Thursday afternoon, when the sun was just right and the leaves were just thin enough and the door was ready to be opened. Some doors are built to be found. That is what Nora says. She says it the way she says everything, matter of fact, slightly impatient, as if the truth should be obvious and she is tired of explaining it. She says, "I didn't hide the vault. I planted it. The way you plant a seed. You put it in the ground and you trust that the right conditions will bring it to the surface. Sam was the right conditions. A 10-year-old boy with a runaway dog and the good sense to pull a handle when he found one. The door is still there. The tree is still growing. The seeds are still waiting. And Sam, who found a room underground that contained the last of things the world had lost, is learning to be the kind of person who makes sure that lost things are found, and found things are never lost again. That is what his grandmother taught him. Not in a classroom, in a room under the woods, with a grow light and 300 jars and a tree that does not know it is a miracle. It is, and so is he. The propagation program exceeded expectations. Within 3 years, the tree species that Nora had preserved underground for nearly 3 decades was growing in 4 protected areas across the region. Seedlings raised from the vault seeds were thriving in soil that matched the microbial profiles Nora had documented decades earlier. The soil samples, which had seemed like an eccentric detail at the time, turned out to be critical. Without the right microbial community, the seeds would not germinate. Nora had known this. She had stored the soil alongside the seeds because she understood that a plant is not just a plant. It is a relationship between organism and environment. You cannot save one without saving the other. Dr. Wen published a paper about the vault that was cited in over 40 subsequent studies. The paper argued that small-scale, community-based conservation efforts like Nora's were not just supplements to institutional programs. They were essential. Institutions are slow. They require funding cycles, committee approvals, political will. A woman with a shovel and a concrete mixer and a 30-year plan doesn't require any of those things. She requires only the knowledge that something is worth saving and the stubbornness to save it. Sam read the paper when he was 12. He understood about half of it. The half he understood was the important half. His grandmother had done something that mattered. not because she was asked to, because she saw something that needed doing and she did it. He asked Nora once why she chose to build the vault in the woods behind the farm instead of working through the university. She said, "The university moves at the speed of committees. I needed to move at the speed of extinction. By the time a committee approved a conservation plan, the species would be gone. I did not have time for approval. I had time for concrete." Sam laughed. Nora did not. She was not joking. The vault became part of the farm's identity. Sam's parents, who had spent years sending their son to the farm for practical reasons, learned about the vault with a mixture of pride and alarm. His mother said, "You built an underground laboratory in the woods, and you didn't tell us?" Nora said, "It is not a laboratory. It is a vault. There is a difference." His mother said, "What is the difference?" Nora said, "A laboratory discovers things. A vault protects them." The farm is quiet now. Nora is 78. Her knees are worse. She goes underground less often. But Sam goes every week, and he brings his school friends sometimes, and they stand in the circular room with the shelves and the specimens and the tree under the dome, and they feel what Sam felt the first time he climbed down the ladder. They feel that the world is full of doors. Most of them are visible. You walk through them every day without thinking. But some are hidden, covered with leaves and moss and years of not looking. And behind those doors are things that someone put there on purpose, things that are too important to leave on the surface where they might be destroyed. Nora put 300 species underground. She built a room to hold them. She powered a grow light with a solar panel buried in the forest floor. She visited weekly for 30 years. She watered a tree that shouldn't exist, and she waited for someone to find the door. Sam found it. A 10-year-old boy chasing a dog named Biscuit. Not a scientist, not a conservationist. A kid with muddy sneakers and a phone full of dog videos who pulled a handle because he was curious. Curiosity is how doors get opened. Not credentials, not funding, not institutional approval. Curiosity, the thing that sends a boy into the woods after a dog and brings him home with a story that changes everything. The door is still there. The tree is still growing. Nora is still making the trip when her knees allow. And Sam, who will be 14 this summer, has already told his grandmother that when she can no longer go underground, he will go for her. Every week. For as long as it takes. For as long as there are seeds on the shelves, and a tree under a dome, and a door in the woods that someone someday will find again. Because that is what doors are for. Not to stay closed. To wait. Patiently, under leaves and moss and thyme, for the right person to come along and pull. Sam pulled, and the world opened up.